Welcome back, everyone, to Britton's Hangout Hour, episode 83. I'm here today with Canadian writer, illustrator, and podcaster, Adrian Gibson. How are you doing today?
Doing very
Or
well,
this
man. Thanks for
evening, I
having me
should
on.
say.
Yes, this fine evening, I'm doing very well. And I like how you address me in the emails as Mr. Gibson. So
I was being polite.
I would prefer that for the rest of this interview.
Yeah, no,
But yeah,
I always feel if I email people, if I call them by their first name, it's too direct, you know? And they're like, what?
no, I liked it. It came across as a bit like cheeky, and I'm on board for that. So thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here, man. I mean, you've recently been getting around.
Yeah,
You put out. So let me get this right. So you're from Canada.
yeah.
You've been to Germany. That's you said you met your wife in Germany. Is that right? Because I think I
No,
heard
so
you say that.
I lived in Berlin for 3 years, and I met my wife while I was still living in Berlin, but I was on vacation in Barcelona.
Okay, and then you're in Ecuador now. So like,
And now I'm in Ecuador, yes. Yeah, because that's where my wife is originally from. So we moved back here together.
fair enough, I guess but that's a hell of a life story though. You also
Yeah,
do tattoos.
sometimes when I tell that story, it sounds a bit like I don't know some rom com or something. But
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
I didn't think of it like that, but yeah, sure. We'll go with that.
If Matthew McConaughey wants to play me, but that was like in his heyday, like 20 years ago, so maybe not anymore.
Yeah, he's done like True Detective now, and he's like in the serious movies. You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
people are like, oh
He's
wow,
a,
this
he's
guy
a,
can actually act. Oh okay.
but you mentioned tattoos. Yes, I was a tattoo artist for 6.5 years, like professionally.
Mm.
Um, and then pandemic hit, and I was like, well, I got to close down my studio because nobody wants tattoos when there's a pandemic going on. It's not a very COVID friendly profession. And then my first son was born, and that's kind of around the time when I started podcasting and taking writing more seriously.
All right. Very. I mean, so I found that you were interesting because you wrote a book called Mushroom Blues, which has a lot of things that just really appeal to me.
There
So
it is right there.
there's a lot of weirdness in it. I mean, I haven't read it yet, but there's a lot of weirdness, and it's a noir, so okay,
Hmm.
that tickles my fancy. And then it says like with the weird worlds of Jeff Vandermeer, Philip K. Dick, and China Mieville. I'm like, take my money right now. Just
Well, you don't have to because I sent you a free
yeah. You sent
copy,
me a
but
free
it's all good.
copy. Very kindly sent me a free copy.
You're welcome. You're welcome. But yeah, the we mentioned True Detective before. Actually, that was a big inspiration. It's kind of like True Detective and my lifelong love for mushrooms just kind of like commingled in this very strange world called the Fungal Verse, which is secondary world, sort of analogous to Earth in a lot of ways. There are humans, but there's also an isolated population of fungal people who live on this kind of isolated archipelago of islands. And yeah, the story Mushroom Blues takes place in the capital city of the fungal people, Neo Kanoko, and there's people with mushrooms growing out of their heads. There's all kinds of strange stuff going on. Weirdness is definitely my vibe because Jeff Vandermeer is one of my big inspirations, and his trilogy Ambergris, as well as his
I
Southern
haven't
Reach
actually read
trilogy,
that
were,
yet.
dude,
Uh,
it's so good. Have you read Southern Reach though, like Annihilation,
I
all those
have. I
books?
actually have them right here. My
Beauty.
good friend Jason Furman, very kindly gave me because I never actually owned them until
Oh,
now.
and you've got the original covers too. I
Yep.
had all three of them, and then I loaned each of them out to different people, and they just kind of got like lost in the shuffle of life. So I got and I was so bummed because I really love the cover artwork for those three editions, but I got like I don't know, like 900 plus page omnibus of the full trilogy, which I really
Yeah,
love.
my
But
my friend Jason
oh,
owns that same one. I have a
yep,
hard time with omnibuses though. But
Yeah, man, it's like you read it and you're like, I got to read this at a table because I can't do it in bed or else my wrists just like fall apart
yeah, yeah,
after a week or
exactly,
two. Yeah, it's
exactly.
too much. It's too much, man.
And I
But I
saw,
love it. I love the thought of it. The thought of it is really nice.
and then
But
like ambergris, I'm like, oh my god, like
yeah,
I've seen they have an omnibus for that. I'm like, oh my god,
yeah.
I can't do this. I don't
But
know
that
if I
one's
can do
bigger.
that.
That one's way bigger than the Southern Reach trilogy because I think those books like are like well over 1,000 pages combined, whereas Southern Reach is like 900 max. But yeah, Ambergris is so cool because it's like City of Saints and Madmen was kind of like introducing the world. Shriek is more of like a character study.
Hers is more of a family drama.
Yeah, it's like a family drama character study with lots of like epistolary kind of like written letters and stuff like that. But Finch is the one that got me. That's book 3 in the trilogy. And that one was like fantasy noir set in this city of Ambergris where these fungal people, the Grey Caps, kind of like rise from the earth and basically take over the city and like recolonize it as a way of like reclaiming what was stolen from them in the past. And I just loved like the blending of genres that he had there, and also the way that he kind of like incorporated fungi and created this race of gray caps. So a lot of Mushroom Blues and a lot of the fungal verse is kind of like a conversation dialogue with Vandermeer and specifically Finch, where it's giving more agency to the fungal people, giving them more individuality as opposed to like a hive mind kind of
Mm.
thing. But also playing into the idea of like for a reader who feels more human and who are you able to kind of like empathize with more, the fungals or the humans or individual characters within the whole spectrum of the story. Whereas Ambergris and Finch, the Grey Caps were very much like drone like hive mind. They felt more insidious and evil as opposed to having like individual personalities.
That's interesting. It kind of so I thought that I first saw you on Nicholas Fuller's
Mm.
stream, and then I was like, oh, this guy's been doing stuff. I guess I never actually heard of him. So sorry about that.
It's
But
all good, man.
but I'm
Hey,
like,
it's never too late to come across new people. So
that's true. That's true. And I mean, you but yeah, you seem to be more interested, at least in the indie sphere, with new weird, and I haven't seen a lot of new weird um, indie books. So here we
I mean,
are.
I would love to see more of it because indie I think is probably at least today like right now in the publishing landscape, indie is the most fitting space for new weird type stories. Because I don't like there was just like a something happening in like the late 90s, early 2000s where authors like Jeff Vandermeer or China Mieville could put out stories with, like big publishers, and big publishers were more willing to take a chance on stories like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so they were able to kind of like build their careers. But I think the introduction of new authors in the sort of weird space has kind of floundered a lot over the past, like, probably even like decade and a half.
Yeah, I think like
It's like,
Vandermeer's like the only one who's still like going. I mean, I
yeah,
did.
yeah.
I have
I mean,
heard Mieville's coming back. He's doing a novel with Keanu Reeves, which when I heard about that, I
nice.
was like, what? What?
That's super
What?
cool. But yeah, like there's just a lot of people that I've talked to who are really into weird fiction, and I think indie's like the perfect space to kind of bring back some of that more experimental type stories. And
I guess the Vor as well. I have the Vor up there, but
yeah,
I don't know if that's new weird. I mean, I've heard it be called new weird, but it's like a thing on its own.
was that B. Catling, I think was
Yes.
the author. Yeah, yeah. I read the Vor, but I hadn't checked out. I think there were like one or two sequels to that, but I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't I hadn't gotten into them. But I think maybe like comics is probably a space that has been more experimental in the last while. Just because comics have always been just kind of dipping its toes into weird shit all the time.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just did a video recently about Saga.
Yeah,
Well,
Saga's amazing.
a character from Saga anyway. I was talking about the Will from Saga,
Mhm.
and yeah, I mean, I don't know if Saga's new weird, but it has some of the most batshit insane things I've ever seen.
That is probably one of the coolest representations of like genre blending that I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, it's something else. I
Yeah.
haven't read anything quite like Saga.
Yeah. And what's the author's like the writer? I think like Brian Vaughan.
Brian K. Vaughan, yep.
Yeah. He did an amazing job with Why the Last Man, and Saga was just like such a step up in terms of storytelling and everything. And the artist, I can't remember the artist's name, but she's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I actually started Why the Last Man because I was like, oh yeah, what's all the big fuss about this? Read the first
Right.
volume, I'm like, oh okay, yeah, this is this is fine. Like from the second volume on, I was like, oh I'm in. This is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
very
like one of
glad
those.
that I did because
Yeah,
I'm
it's like one
in.
of those things where it's like, Wheel of Time, all kinds of different long ass series where it's like, get in, like you have to read book X in order for things to get really, really good. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I
and
get,
don't get me wrong, I generally get peeved when people are like, oh wait till like book 3 because
yeah.
that just drives me crazy. But
Tell me I got to read 2 books until I get to the good one.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's like first volume of Why the Last Man is pretty good. Like it's just,
Hmm.
I mean, the pacing's kind of weird, but aside from that, it's pretty good. But the rest
Yeah.
of it is just great stuff. Just
Agreed.
I love it.
Me too.
I don't know how Brian K. Vaughan does it. Like he can do like fast paced storytelling, but you still have enough like character depth where you care about what's going on. I don't know how he does it, but
It's because
it's a
he
gift.
allows his stories the time to kind of simmer in those quiet moments. And I think that's why Saga really worked, is because it's centered around a family. And so, in order to have those like quiet moments where the family and the different characters are able to kind of like actually feel each other out and have conversations and stuff like that, as opposed to like constant action going on,
Uh huh.
that allows for all the characters in his, like, even I can't remember the name of the villain in Saga, the one who has like a TV for a head.
Oh, Prince
Um,
Robot.
yeah, exactly. So Prince Robot is like, even he has quiet moments where he's able to kind of like reveal more about his character, and you end
Yeah, I
up
was
like
about to say
empathizing with
I
him to a
kind of know
degree
who
too.
the characters are because I was kind of
Yeah,
looking back at it the other day, so I'll probably know what you're talking about.
yeah,
But yeah, no, that's a fantastic comic book series, and pacing is often a thing I get kind of up in arms about with comics because like it for some reason I don't know if it's just me, but I noticed that either they're too fast and you can't like sit down and just like
mhm,
like you say let a quiet moment speak for itself, or it like goes on too long and it's like over dialogue, Alan Moore style, but not as good as Alan Moore.
yeah. I totally agree. I've read all of the 28 volumes of Lone Wolf and Cub
Oh my
last
god.
year, and I adore that series so much. But there are some moments where it's like, this has gone on for a really, really long time, and I would appreciate this to like pick up. But that comic doesn't give a shit about what its readers want. It's like, it's gonna give you all the information that it wants to give you, and there's gonna be some moments where you're like, you know, sort of like a theme or like a kind of idea is like drawn out over the entirety of a volume, and so it's like, yeah, sometimes you just got to roll with it. But I totally agree, comics is a bit trickier in order to find that fine line between like pacing and sort of, I would say even like plot development and character development, kind of like allowing them the time to breathe.
Yeah, I mean, like I mean, there are authors who do character development and pacing really, really well. Like I think Brian K. Vaughan is one.
Hmm.
Um, Jeff Lemire, at least I'm talking
Yeah.
modern because I know like I could mention Alan Moore, but Alan Moore's kind of like burned the he's so burned by the comic industry. He's just
Yeah.
going back in his hidey hole in Northampton. Um, but like Jeff Lemire's really good at it. Well, when he's like on form, he's really good. There's some of his
Yeah.
comics where you can kind of tell he
Descender.
wasn't fully on
Descend.
it.
Yeah, Descender for me is like top notch. Really, really
Yeah,
good.
I like Descender. The art is just so good. Um, Yeah, no, but again, just there's some pacing stuff. I'm like, I still like it though. I
Yeah,
think,
some moments that felt a bit too rushed.
yeah, I love Sweet Tooth though. Like that.
Oh yeah.
Oh my, yeah. That I guess you could call that new weird. That one's just out there.
Agreed, man. Yeah, that's why I love comics. It's like because it gives you the art too, and I feel like new weird is like the perfect sort of genre to explore super strange visual themes. Like being an illustrator myself, I love being able to kind of explore things through the visual mediums. And for me, it's like I love drawing mushrooms. I love drawing weird shit. And then it's like you get into things like body horror, and it just becomes like exponentially more impactful when you can dole that out in a comic page as opposed to any other medium.
Oh, I see you gave a 5-star to What Moves the Dead, which I actually read a few months back. That's a weird, creepy body horror story.
Yeah, so just kind of like as a fun lark, I decided to start fungal punk as like a thing because
Punk.
yeah, just because I love sort of like the like punkisms and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of cyberpunk, but I feel like punk is often used in like a really shallow way especially in literature.
I've noticed a lot of the punks are pretty ironic, like Manor Punk,
Yeah.
if you've ever heard of that. Like
Yeah,
that's
and like just I love it. It reminds me of like music genres from like the early 2000s. Like here we got like some emo core, like some random crap like that. We're just gonna have some fun with it. And fungal punk, I think, is like obviously it can be tied into new weird, but I think
sure,
there's
yeah.
so many books that
Which I'm
incorporate
not shocked that you
mushrooms.
like Jeff Vandermeer. He is like
Yeah,
nature porn all over his work.
yeah, exactly. Like
Well,
Jeff
in Southern
Vandermeer is
Reach
like,
anyway.
yeah, he's like OG fungal punk for me.
You
But
know,
there's so many authors who are
can you believe
incorporating
it's been
fungi.
10 years since they first put out the Southern Reach books?
Has it been that long?
Yeah. And they're going to put out a new
When?
one this year.
Yeah, I saw
Which I'm
Absolution.
definitely
Um,
picking that one up.
Me too. But has it been that long? I thought when did it come out? Like 2013 or something?
Yeah, like 2014.
Okay. Yeah. But I just love that more authors are incorporating fungi into their fiction, and that it's becoming like a more prominent thing. I think
Yeah, I
just
see
this
you have
year
like
alone,
sexy fungal ladies back there.
yeah, I got some. These are tattoo designs.
Oh.
But there's like,
I
yeah,
can just
I just
imagine
love.
someone getting that and just going home being like, what the fuck is that?
I mean, I have tattooed like this one right here, which is like a woman with like a lotus growing from her head. Um, yeah, I just got mushrooms all over the place, man. But I love seeing mushrooms in fiction. Like, I'm glad that it's becoming more of a thing.
So
Even if it
have you
took
played
like
like
The Last of Us. Yeah, even if it took The Last of Us to popularize it, I'm happy that was the vessel through which this broader cultural infection started.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, I mean, I don't know if I don't know if it's like the fungi. It's just like when I read Annihilation for the first time, I was just struck by. I mean, I won't pretend it's the most original vision. It is sort of. I mean, Jeff Vandermeer has said that he wasn't inspired by Stalker, but it reminded me of Stalker. I mean,
Yeah,
there is Stalker influence in there, rather
yeah,
consciously or not. But that was before I knew what Stalker was. So when I read this, I was like 17. I was like, oh my god,
yeah.
I didn't know sci-fi could do that.
I mean, did you watch the movie Stalker, and have you read the book Roadside Picnic?
I have. I love the film. Um, book I like, but I think the film. It's one of those rare ones where I think the film did it better. It's kind of weird. I've had some friends be like, "What? Really?" Like, yeah.
I agree. And there's like a lot of stuff that I think it was the Strugatsky brothers are the ones who wrote all those books. They're like fully entrenched excuse me, in like weird. I think like for me, weird, I can trace it back to probably like them in terms of sort of like the Eastern European influences, and then Philip K. Dick in terms of like North America.
Oh yeah, I recently
You know?
just read Ubik or Ubik, or however you pronounce that.
So good, man. But
I
it's
liked it. Yeah, it was. I'm like, yo, this PKD, let's do it. I
yeah.
read it. I'll admit I don't I might need to read it again because I was kind of going through a hard time when I was reading that, and it was just kind of I was in a weird spot, and but I completed it, and I like it a lot. I just finished
Mhm.
it not too long ago. I don't
Yeah,
know
I
if it's as
mean,
good as A Scanner Darkly, but I enjoyed it a lot.
yeah, I mean, a lot of PKD's work is like all over the place in terms of quality, but I think what I admire about him is his ability, or was his ability, to really explore ideas in out of the box ways, and you know, exploring things like psychedelics, exploring things like consciousness in the mind, and the ways in which,
Reality.
yeah, like reality in modern society, we're kind of pre-programming the lifestyles and thoughts of so many people. It's like taking so much of the stuff that people kind of um, place in the shoes of something like 1984, but
Mm-hmm.
exploring those themes and those ideas in ways that are like just more surreal, and I think more, just more powerful if you're able to kind of like get through most of the stories, because some of them are like they get to points where they're often incomprehensible, but a lot of his work is more kind of like grounded and easier to follow, like Man in the High Castle, if you're into like alternate realities in World War II and history and that kind of stuff. And A Scanner Darkly is absolutely brilliant, and most of his
I do love
work,
A Scanner Darkly the best. I
yeah,
think
and like even the adaptation of that is fantastic.
it's
And
probably the one good way to do a PKD adaptation is
yeah,
that
with the
rotoscoping.
rotoscoping, exactly, yeah,
I'm
super
like,
cool.
that was I thought that was a really inspired choice. I'm like,
Yeah,
bro, do all the PKD movies like that.
exactly. Plus the fact that they had like the most ridiculous cast ever in terms of like really high quality actors. You know,
Yeah, I got
like
like Robert
Robert
Downey
Downey Jr. You
Jr.
got
Yeah,
like what's his name? He was in True Detective as well. Woody Harrelson. You got like so many
Keanu's in
amazing.
there, and
Yeah,
like it
Keanu.
actually work is kind of flatness works because like he's basically a drug fiend
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant, and I think
slash super cop losing his mind.
yeah. But I think a lot of people would be surprised at like how much of modern media is influenced by adaptations of his work. So it's like a lot of these films and TV shows that people are just like in love with. You know, it's like people look at something like Minority Report, and that was a really groundbreaking movie at the time with like Tom Cruise as the lead. It's like,
Mm.
yeah, that came from a short story by Philip K. Dick. You know,
Yeah, I
Blade
always tell
Runner.
people to start with his short stories if
Yep.
nowhere else
Yep.
because like they're pretty easy to digest. I mean, like I always tell people this, and people always blow me off, but I always tell people this: you gotta read PKD in stages. Like you can't
Hmm.
just jump in with Valis and think you're gonna like get somewhere. I mean, you
No,
can
no.
try, but you're probably not gonna understand it.
It's gonna be a bit tricky to jump into something like Valis or Ubik that early on. But I think, yeah, like you said, like there's so many stages, but also I think in terms of in terms of like the republication of his work, there are some really solid like collected story uh, that you can buy in like paperback or whatever. So you can buy like these story collections and get a taste for PKD, and then they've got a ton of his back catalog uh, published just in like the last 10 years or so. And so it's like you can jump into The Man in the High Castle. You can jump into, you know, the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, which is just weird as shit. You can
Yeah,
get
I'm
into
thinking of picking up Eldritch next. Either that or Flow My Tears.
Flow My Tears, the policeman said, is fantastic. So there's like, yeah, like you said, stages works for PKD.
Either
It's
that
like
or
it's
like
like a
Martian. Like everything about Pete. That's another thing I always tell people. Like I'm just like, dude, everything about PKD is just bizarre.
yeah,
Concepts weird.
yeah.
Names weird.
The
Titles
man, the
out
man,
there.
weird. Yeah.
Man was weird too.
Yeah, yeah, like he had such a bizarre life, and I feel like his work, his bibliography is
Like
like,
literally, Valis is about how he thought like he saw Jesus or something, or
mhm.
like he had like a profound, which he was probably going crazy, but
No, he had like a psychedelic experience where
yeah, you're
yeah.
like, dude.
But that's the thing. It's like I look at PKD's work as like a psychedelic experience, and for me that kind of adds so much more to it because you can kind of embrace the absurdity of it and the ways in which the stories progressively get more and more surreal. Just
Hmm.
like the individual stories, but also his like bibliography as a whole,
And also,
you
kind
know?
of like new is he's kind of the one of the precursors for new weird, because
Yeah.
like you know, though I mean to be fair, he was too weird even for like the new wave guy. They were already kind of out there.
Yeah. But then again, like I think he was coming off of like the Beat Generation, and there are a lot of really strange books that came out of the Beat Generation, like what is it? William S. Burroughs, like Naked Lunch. Have you ever read Naked Lunch?
I have not, but I've heard of it. I've heard that one's just
It is
off the
fucking
rocker.
bizarre. It is so bizarre, but I feel like that's kind of like a tradition that PKD was kind of following in the footsteps of. And so I think it's really cool that there are like multiple waves of weird fiction, and hopefully now it's like indie starts to, I can even see sort of like inklings of it in trad, where especially with like novellas and stuff, that they're allowing a bit more experimentation with this kind of stuff. And indie is definitely the perfect space for people to just drop really weird stuff and hopefully find an audience, even if it is a little bit more niche.
So you're thinking if like Jeff Vandermeer started writing today, he would probably fare better in
In indie.
indie.
Yeah, 100%. Because he started at a time when publishing was more experimental and it was more open, and there were more indie publishers and small presses that were willing to take chances like that. And he was able to kind of like build up his career on this foundation, and then with Southern Reach found like a new level of success. But I don't know if that would be possible today for like someone starting out brand new.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, like God, who are the like two like there's like two big like weird fiction writers today who aren't just or as you know as I tend to kind of scoff at the because like there's the weird tale which is basically horror just weirder,
Mm-hmm.
supernatural horror just weirder, and then there's like this other kind of smorgasbord of other like fantasy and science fiction and other stuff you can play with.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like before I launched the book, I put together like a list of books that I've personally read that include fungi in them, and some of those are just like really trippy, like Tade Thompson's The Wormwood trilogy, which started with Rosewater. That one is like, for me, is 100% weird fiction. But you could also call it like sci-fi thriller. It was published by Orbit, which is really surprising, but I think that was like, at least 8 years ago. And so I don't know if like a big publisher like Orbit would take a chance like that now, when so many of the publishers are focusing on like cozy fantasy or romantasy and all these different things that are more, um I guess, like from a marketing and like a financial perspective, are more viable than something like a weird sci-fi thriller that has like fungi and aliens and stuff like that in it.
I mean, that's fair. I can't really argue with that.
Yeah,
Though
because it's like super niche, man.
I
But
know it is really niche. That's like that's why when I saw your video, I'm like I gotta talk to this guy because we like the same things. So you've
yeah,
also read Mieville, so have you read his Bez Leg books? Have you read all of them?
yeah. So I've read. Okay, so in terms of Mieville, the one I started with, which I think is probably the most common book that people start with, is The City in the City.
Yeah, that's where I started too. I'm
Like,
hoping to reread it again this year because there's some
yeah, I
stuff
mean,
I
because
think I missed.
like PKD, it's like that is an author who you should probably take in stages. And the city is one of the most approachable of his books, even though it's like a
Even
weird,
though
like
I still
mind
don't
bending.
know what the concept of
Yeah,
that book
it's like it's
is.
such a mind bending police procedural, but it's still the most approachable of his work. And it's like I read Perdido Street Station, which I really love. Um, The Scar is amazing. I adore that book so much.
You know,
And then I
I'm
read
yeah.
Embassy Town, which was probably like one of the most difficult books I've ever read. Which
Yeah, it
is
was one of
like,
my more disappointing books last year. I might read it again because I don't know if I was in the right headspace to read it, but you are right. It is pretty
I
difficult
was
and weird.
not, man. It's like I did not expect going into that to be reading an entire book about like basically like lost in translation with aliens. It's
Yeah.
like,
I'm like, what's
fuck.
going on here? What's the
Yeah, man.
story?
It's
Where's the
so
story
it's
at?
yeah. So
No. But I read Pretty Street Station. That just cracked my head open. I'm like, oh my
mhm.
gosh, like it's one of those books I can't shut up about now. In the Scar, which it's really weird because I've thought about giving the Scar my always coveted 5 stars because it's one of those books where I don't know if you've had this experience. Like you read it and you're like, man, that was really good, and then you like sit with it and it like stays with you over time.
Yeah.
And the Scar is one of those books. And I think one could make the argument that like it has a better structure than Perdido Street Station, but I don't know. I just love the raw adventurousness and creativity in Perdido Street Station.
Yeah, there's just like an incredible this is something that I really adore about his work, but also Jeff Vandermeer's is like um this very like rich world building that doesn't hit you over the face, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is something I loved about the Ambergris trilogy. It's like I love it about Southern Reach and Perdido Street Station and The Scar, and so much of Mieville's work is like does an amazing job of introducing world from the perspective of the characters, the POVs, without being like bashing you over the head to be like, here's how this world is so different and so weird and all that kind of stuff. And that for me was like such an inspiration for how I kind of wrote Mushroom Blues and how I wanted to introduce people to the fungal verse is my friend Jonathan Navarre put it really well because he was one of my beta readers and he was like, your world building, man, it's like microdosing. So I was like, I have adopted that wholeheartedly. So, um,
You're making me more
which I
excited to check out your book. I'm gonna have to.
thanks, man. Well, that's the hope. But I think like microdosing is a good analogy for it because it's like you basically eschew info dumping as much as possible and try to infuse any sort of like world building and exposition into dialogue and sort of like character moments just as naturally as possible. And that's something that I really appreciate about
Yeah, I
authors
was
like
actually,
Mieville and Vandermeer.
I was actually talking about this with Tim McKay last night on our
Nice.
podcast episode. Excuse me. And I was talking about how like info dumping I usually don't like unless it's like if it's like a scholarly character or if it's like if it
Mm-hmm.
makes sense for that character because
Yeah.
there's a scene in Perdido Street Station where Isaac's explaining to the Birdman Yagarick about how he's planning to give him his flight back and he
Mm-hmm.
basically starts explaining all this stuff and like while I was a little kind of like it felt like it made sense for like Isaac's character to do
Yeah.
that because like you know that sounds like something he would do.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's like what naturally fits the character best in terms of like A, how they perceive the world, and B, how they would speak to somebody else about how they perceive the world. And it's like if someone's if a character is super excited about something and they're gonna like through dialogue and through sort of like their body actions and stuff like that, kind of like nerd out about something or just like over explain something to another character. If it
I
genuinely
also just
fits
love
that
how
character,
vivid New Crobazon is.
yeah,
I'm
it's
just
so
like,
good.
dude, give me more of that. I read the Scar. I'm like, man, this is really good. And there were like people who were like, oh, this might even be better. And like, I don't know if I'd go there. You could make an argument, but I don't know if I would go there because
They're both good in their own ways.
I like Perdido Street Station just a little bit more.
Yeah, because that was like the first that was my first introduction to that world, so I think it kind of just sits a little closer to my heart.
Yeah, and also it's
Um,
just like because it's like but I love New Crobazon and like a weird I felt Bellis's pain when she was like I want to go back to New Crobazon. I'm like I know I do
Me too.
too.
Oh man.
And then I read Iron Council and I was like oh. Though apparently China Mieville really likes it the best out of those Bazlag novels, which cool I guess.
That's fine for you, man. I will happily disagree.
No, but yeah, I like a lot. I like a lot of I've liked. It's weird because the last two Mieville books I read were kind of whimpers for me, but he always has an interesting view. I think.
Hmm. I just appreciate that.
I also appreciate his creativity.
Yeah, there's sort of like an ability for authors like him to tackle really meaningful themes of human nature and just like the world and how we live our lives and morality and these different really complex stuff that he's able to fictionalize in ways that are very very interesting and like surprisingly interesting.
Mm.
It's like nobody's gonna be like I'm gonna go to an ethics class and I'm gonna like have the greatest time ever. There are some people who really like ethics and that's totally fine, but it's not like you'd go into a fiction book and be like, look at like the city and the city and think about like what are the sort of boundaries of social norms and like what are the ways in which we judge the people around us, or what are the ways in which we ignore certain castes of society, and exploring these really difficult topics but through the form of fiction, I think for me was really inspirational in terms of approaching something like Mushroom Blues. And Vandermeer does it really well as well, where he's like exploring deep themes of colonization and sort of
Nature,
Im- imperialism in Ambergris, and then in Southern Reach, it's like exploring nature and sort of like
greed,
yeah, so much amazing,
espionage.
yeah, so much cool stuff. And so for me, as like going into Mushroom Blues, I was like, okay, I'm writing like a police procedural, with like kind of touches of noir and stuff like that. But at
So
the same
is
time,
this like an ongoing thing, or is this like a so is this like a PI, or I don't want to say PI because you said police procedural, but is it like one of those just long running series, or is it just like what
it's
is it?
it's not going to be super long. So like the Hoffman Report, which Mushroom Blues is book one, that's going to be 4 books. But it's all going to be like sort of each book is tackling its own particular investigation, but then there's like an overarching story across all 4 of them.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
then because it takes place in the Fungal Verse, which is like this shared universe that I created, there's going to be uh, different series that take place in this world. Sometimes intersecting timeline wise, but then sometimes like 30 years in the future or like 250 years in the past. So it's kind of using this world as like a way to explore different things. And yeah, like Mushroom Blues, it's a police procedural, but I get into some pretty dark shit about like colonization and imperialism and sort of like military occupation and things like that. And then on the personal side, the main character, Henrietta Hoffman, she is basically going through this personal trial of like her past uh, traumas and transgressions and things like that. And essentially going through her own like psychedelic awakening in the ways that I've I,
Psychedelic awakening.
I've yeah, like I've personally experienced in my own life, and I kind of applied
Oh,
that to her. So
wait. So are you saying you've taken hallucinogens?
many times, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've thought about. I've certainly thought of like. I hope my parents aren't listening in on this, but um, but like I've always been kind of oddly curious about hallucinogens, but I always get worried I'll be like Sid Barretted or something and go crazy. You know,
I mean,
I don't know if you're familiar. I don't know how familiar you are with Pink Floyd, but
yeah. But there are cases where if somebody has sort of a genetic predisposition for schizophrenia or bipolar, that hallucinogenic experience can essentially activate that part of their brain. So there are lots of people who it's like they may have schizophrenia or bipolar in their family, um, but they in particular have not shown any symptoms of that. But a psychedelic experience could essentially trigger a schizophrenic or bipolar episode. So
so do they like take hallucinogens like freely in this in mushroom blues or something? So is it like full PKD with the like weird drugs?
not necessarily. It's kind of like they're the fungal people and they have their sort of like society and their customs and their language and everything like that. And psychedelics and sort of like mushrooms in general are a huge part of their daily lives, their rituals, their religion as well. And they're also able to communicate with each other, not necessarily telepathically, but like sort of empathically. So they're able to read each other's emotions through sort of like an interconnected mycelial network that permeates this whole society. So they're able to say like, Britton's really pissed off right now, and he's kind of like emitting chemical, those like emotional chemicals into the mycelial network. But you could also obscure yourself and obscure your intentions, sort of like a social media platform where you can like block somebody or mute them. And then at the same
Put them
time,
on
it's like,
mute
yeah. It's just like,
telepathically.
I'm gonna fucking mute you. I don't like what you're. I'm just tired of you right now. And then at the same time, when it comes to like their religion, the consumption of like psychedelic tea and the consumption of mushrooms in certain religious practices. So it's like I incorporated a lot of hallucinogens and a lot of sort of like fungal biology into the fungal people. And then for the main character, I'm not going to spoil anything, but she has quite a trip, and I will leave it at that.
Well, that does make me. Have you? I don't know, like if you watch like HBO Max or anything. Like I don't know if you got that over there in
Mm-hmm.
Ecuador,
Yep.
but there's this show that came out and it's animated and it's about these people trapped on this planet. I can't think of the name at
Yes.
the moment.
I know exactly which one you're talking about because who recommended it? Robert Jackson Bennett. I had him on my podcast and he was talking about it.
It's something.
Um,
It's something something. I can't think of it at the moment, but
yeah, I'm going to find it. Scavenger's Reign is the name of it.
Scavenger's Reign.
Yep. And it is fantastic. Like, it is really, really good.
Yeah, that's a weird
And
one.
that one equally gets super psychedelic at times.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I was liking it, but I had to like take a break. I'm like, this is kind of, I need to chill out for a moment.
need to take a step back from this.
Yeah, just need to step back for a minute. But yeah, no, it's, I have I enjoy the weird and the strange, and
I think because based on the fiction that you like, I think obviously like start off slow, but I think hallucinogens could be very fascinating and potentially beneficial for you.
though, then again, in the Sid Barrett case, apparently he was taking that like every day, so I bet you probably don't recommend doing that.
Yeah, I mean it's like in his case it's like he was taking a lot of LSD as well, and LSD is very very powerful in comparison to mushrooms. I mean obviously like mushrooms you can control your dose, but it's like LSD, the dosage is like on the micro scale and it's so potent that if you're taking it every day, this feels like very PKD. If you're taking it every day, you could get into a cycle of questioning reality and not really understanding like what am I hallucinating and what am I
Yeah, I'm probably not
actually
gonna do that.
experiencing. Yeah, like that is just beyond absurd in order to like, but that's like the such a 70s rock star way to just like lose your mind is to go down like I'm gonna take a ton of psychedelics
I'm
day
even gonna
after
sneak it
day.
in my coffee. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
drink coffee.
just like probably has like a little like eyedropper filled with like LSD in liquid form or something.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
That's my point here. I'm not
I
gonna do that.
I do not recommend to anybody that they do that. But it's like start off slow, just like PKD, start off with some short stories. You can do a little microdosing, get a feel for it.
So like, do you like Grant Morrison? Because he's in terms of comics, because he's one of those just out there, bizarre. Probably took a bunch of LSD and
Yeah.
other drugs in their lifetime. Sorry,
Yeah. Like
they're them now. They're they now.
yeah, Grant Morrison. I just love so many like
Even Alan Moore to some extent.
yeah.
He's got some
But
weird ass shit in his work.
also
Like, did you
Warren
ever read?
Ellis.
Did you read a Swamp Thing from
Yeah,
Alan Moore?
Swamp Thing, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing is fantastic. One comic that really, really hit me, even though it's just like so crude, but it was Warren Ellis's what is it? Uh, Transmetropolitan.
Oh, I love that series. I
So
did a chat about it on my channel.
that is like such a wild comic series, and it's like obviously like the main character like Spider is doing a ton of drugs.
Yeah.
That was basically like if like Neuromancer had sex with like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Is
Oh my
basically
God.
like if those two just like had a baby, it would be Transmetropolitan. It is super crude, but there's so many aspects of it that are very sort of like eerily prescient about things that have come to fruition today. And so it's like that comic came out, I think, in like the 90s, but it was like, it basically presented like a political leader that was just like creepily similar to like, you know, Donald Trump
Oh,
and
I don't know if I'd do the smiler. Like, I don't know if I don't know if Trump is, to his credit, I don't know if Trump is as psychotic as
he's
the
not as
smiler.
psychotic or intelligent,
Uh,
but
the
I
smiler
do
is creepy
yeah,
as hell, though. Oh my
right.
God.
But I do think that is like such a sort of like prescient representation of like how politics have gone today and the ways in which politicians are doing things that are far outside the bounds of legality and very much like shady money deals and all this kind of stuff and illegal wars and everything. And then there's like the Martians and the ways in which like the Martian population is subjugated
Yeah,
and
yeah,
segregated. And it feels very much about like
that's one of
conversations today about like sort of like queer culture and transgender and everything like that. It's like it's fucking wild, man.
yeah, no, it's one of the few, like, I'm not, it's weird. I'm not a huge cyberpunk guy. Even that's one of the
Hmm.
few cyberpunk I do enjoy a lot, though.
Yeah.
Is Transmet, because it really kind of goes into that, really deals with. Because I'll admit, I find transhumanism is a kind of creepy idea, but
I love the concept of transhumanism and sort of like posthumanism, transhumanism is like to me so fascinating.
I think how Ellis did it, I was really interested, and also I just like the political anger and crude humor. So I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, it felt like it feels like I read it sort of in like the aftermath of the 2008 like financial crisis and sort of like the midst of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and all this kind of stuff. And so
Hmm.
it felt just like creepily sort of analogous to things that were happening in the real world, but all in the form of this like gonzo journalist who's like taking drugs and just like doing absurd shit.
Being
So
verbally abusive to his
yeah,
assistants,
yep.
hating on cats.
So much hate towards cats, man.
I'm like, geez, Warren, what did cats ever do to you? Ah, yeah, that's a
Oh,
great series. Though. I mean, I read, when I was a late teenager, I basically binged on a lot of the British comic writers who came in the 80s and 90s. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was a fun time. And
Yeah.
also, I get kind of mad. I'm like, how do they write our superhero comics better than us? That's just embarrassing.
Oh man. I'm gonna switch real quick. I think I froze.
Yes, you did freeze, but
Um,
I can still hear you.
okay. I'm gonna jump in on Firefox.
It's Firefox, guys. It's Firefox.
It's Firefox.
Well, to quote the great philosopher Brian Lee Durfee, we're probably gonna cut this out in uh,
All right.
editing. There we
And we're
go.
back.
There we go. Um, but yeah, no. Transmet is great though. I love that series a lot.
All right. I
And
can't hear you for some reason.
you can't hear me?
So
Oh no. I can hear you. Oh jeez.
no, I can't hear you. I don't know if it's mine.
I can hear you.
What's
Oh.
happening?
Mm.
Okay. I'm gonna switch back to Google Chrome. I'm gonna see if the audio works there. Technical difficulties, people.
It's a complicated matter. The internet. Um
All right.
there we go. Can you hear me
Yep.
now?
I can hear you now.
All
All right,
right.
we're good.
I'll probably
Google-
cut all
Google-
that out in post. As
Okay.
Brian Lee Durfee likes to say. Have you had him on your show?
No, I haven't.
Oh. Well,
But
yeah.
he seems like a really nice guy. It's like I know he was in like hospital recently and everything,
I was
but
like, oh man.
yeah.
Oh no. No, but yeah. I guess we'll get rid of that in post production.
Or we just leave it in for the rawness of it.
The rawness, yeah.
But yeah, man. But Transmetropolitan is just such a cool comic book series. Like the art style is just unbelievably good.
Did you ever read The Boys? Because it has the same artist as Transmet, and I think the Transmet art's better. I just like it.
I mean, I haven't read the boys comic, but I like the show, even though it's like ridiculously gratuitous. At times.
He's in the comic. The comic's even worse.
Yeah, but it could be like the same artist, but it could be a different like colorist. So
that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and that artist has done other things I like. Another Garth Ennis classic, Punisher Born, I liked a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you know, I'll admit I'm more of a Preacher fan than the Boys. I like the Boys, but I like Preacher more. There's like feels more unique, I guess. Yeah.
I haven't read Preacher though.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, it is really wacky and it has a lot of like crude humor in it, but it's good stuff. I like it a lot.
I'm glad that we're talking so much about comics. I don't get to
I
talk
know.
about comics too much with people.
I know, yeah. One of my niches is I talk about comic books on my channel, and because like a lot of the BookTube people talk about like manga, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, but they're all reading the same manga as well. It's like
No,
there's like
wrong.
a
There's
huge
some good
wave.
manga, like you know.
Yeah.
Naoki
But then
Urasawa
again, it's
was
like
great, you know, like.
But like, how many videos do I want to watch about like One Piece? You know?
Oh my god. I haven't read one. I haven't read One Piece, but like I've seen some of the art. I'm like, I don't know if that's for me. I can deal with some like. Look, I love comics because, like you say, you know, you can get away with a bunch of weird stuff in comics that, like, you really can't anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But like, there's like I have limits, people. There's like the weird anime stuff that I'm not like a big fan of, like the big eyes and why does everyone look like they're 12?
Yeah, but that's just kind of like a manga thing in general.
Yeah, I know. I mean, they probably make fun of our superhero comics. Like, what is this?
Yeah. Why they're all so fucking muscular?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Why are they all so muscular? Well, mean, yeah, it's not Rob Liefeld, but yeah, fair point. Fair point.
They're all trying to just like make up for some kind of deficiency in their lives.
Yeah, no, but like, I mean, there's good manga out there, but I'm like, there's not like there's good like comic book channels out there, but like, I don't see a lot of booktubers. There are some. I'll acknowledge there are some who do, but I like the it's so I talk about American comics on my channel
And British.
and British, yes. When I feel the opportunity. I am, I would love to talk about 20 or not 20 AD, 2000 AD at some point because there's some good stuff.
Nice. Yeah. I'm just basically like I've been talking to my co-host MJ about this, MJ Kuhn, and I've been basically like writing a book got me into this like serious lull of not being able to sit down and just like enjoy a book and kind of like comics was my salvation in that case where I was able to read like a physical book or an ebook but very very slowly, and then I was able to burn through tons and tons of comics. And like most of it I read on my iPad through like Comixology, which has been really helpful because it's like shipping a ton of comics is just like a pain in the ass to get to Ecuador. even just being like in the States or something, it's like, man, you can spend so much money on physical comics. But I found like reading comics on my iPad was actually really, really helpful. So it's like, yeah, that was my salvation, man, was reading comics while my like novel reading suffered immensely while I was writing my own novel. So
that's fair. I mean, I'll admit my comic reading has been kind of dried up. I did recently read Headlopper, which I thought was fun.
Interesting.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever read Hellboy, but
yep. But which run though?
Which run? What do you mean?
I mean, like I can't remember the name of the artist, but there was like a really cool run of Hellboy that I just absolutely loved. But there was like, it's a specific art style that I'm just trying to figure out.
I mean, I'm just talking about like
Mike Mignola. He's like,
oh,
yeah,
yeah. It's the Mike. The art style remind me of Mike Mignola a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's more like a sword and sorcery story.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah, and Headlopper lops off heads with his gigantic sword. If you didn't get
it's a perfect title.
Yeah, I know. It's great. And also there's other comics I want to like get to. Like it's ridiculous. The TBR is insane.
It's always just like unbearable.
Like I have Astro City over there. I've wanted to read that comic for a long time.
I haven't read that one either.
I mean, I don't know what you think of superhero comics because I've met a bunch of people with different opinions but yeah, it's basically it's a superhero comic basically.
I mean, it depends. Like I'm not really into sort of like the mainline superhero comics.
Fair enough.
Like
yeah,
the Marvel and the DC. This has never really been my thing. But like I adore the comic book medium, and I'm not gonna steer away from.
The Astro City's a what I call it in it's at Image, so it's at Image now. It's gone through several publishers.
Yeah. But I mean, if it's not like I don't know. For me, it's just like I've kind of got like burnt out on superheroes in general, just because of the MCU.
Yeah, just how popular they are. I hear you.
Yeah, but also just like the sort of like the dip in quality of these movies, and like just the fact that I don't give a shit about what's going on in them anymore.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean,
but if it's like a good non-Marvel or DC superhero comic, like I'd be on board for that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's some like Black Hammer I really enjoy a lot. So.
You can send me a list of recommendations.
Yeah, I actually made a video called because like I have one of just like the independent comics, or well, independent rather it be. I was thinking more like Image and Dark Horse and
Hmm.
whatever, rather than like because there's some people who like I guess they just don't read Image or Dark Horse. It kind of drives me crazy, and they like equate indie with like Robert Crumb or something like that.
I mean, Image and Dark Horse have put out some of like the best comics I've ever read. So
Oh yeah, most definitely. I
yeah,
mean, Image was the company. I'm like, oh wow, there's more than just superheroes. Like, man, maybe
yeah,
I could do something here. Like, yeah.
yeah. And Vertigo has done like, I mean, Vertigo I think was like Transmetropolitan and a ton of
Oh
other
yeah.
amazing comics. There's also Boom, which I don't know how new they are, but I think it's I think it's Boom. Is it Boom? Um, Let me just check. Boom Studios, yeah. So they've done like a ton of really cool stuff in the last 5 years or so. But like they even do like Dune spin-off comics. Um, what was this other one? There's this really cool sort of like spy thriller comic book that I read. I got really big into like sort of like spy thrillers and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just Jonathan Navarre, my the friend I mentioned earlier, he recommended a bunch of stuff to me. And there's like Velvet is super cool.
I've wanted to read that.
Um,
I'm a big Ed Brubaker fan,
it's amazing, man. It's
especially when he's
amazing.
with Sean Phillips. I think those two
Yeah,
create magic.
yeah, absolutely amazing. The one that I was thinking of was called. It's just called Bang. It's like all
Bang,
capital letters with an exclamation point.
bang.
But yeah, just bang, dude. But that comic is really cool, just like stylistically amazing. It reminds me so much of the video game Deathloop, if you've ever
I think I've heard of that.
heard of that. It's like the same studio that made Dishonored, but in terms of like the art style, like the art style reminded me a lot of Deathloop. Um, just yeah, Bang was super cool, and Deathloop is a really cool game as well.
Yeah, I don't play a lot of video games these days. I did start
Me neither,
Disco
but
Elysium, but I was like, this is fucking I can't at the moment, so I put it down.
Disco Elysium is great though. That was actually another big inspiration for Mushroom Blues is that
Yeah, and
game.
then I
But
ended up like
I
looking it
totally
up.
agree with you.
I looked up stuff about apparently like this game has like a freaking backstory, man. Like,
Yep.
like there's
No,
like a
they
bunch of
they
drama with the like behind the scenes. It's ridiculous.
yeah, but then also like the history of the world itself. They trace back like the history of the world for like hundreds of years and all this kind of stuff. So it's like the world building that they did for the game was pretty insane as well. And then the drama of the
I love the
studio.
art style though. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
the art style is incredible. But I totally understand that that is a game where it's like you have to be in the right mindset because it's very story heavy, but it's also very like game mechanic heavy. There are a lot of game mechanics
Yeah,
that you have
I'm
to
at the
learn.
part I walk up to this like big guy and I keep trying to like get out of the way. He's just I don't know. He's just weird.
Yeah, but that game is quite a lot to grasp, but if you get into it, then it really pays off. That game and that world is just brilliant, and yeah, I
Right?
pulled a lot of that kind of inspiration into my creative blender, and
Yeah, apparently the guy who wrote that wrote like a novel, but it's in like another language.
yeah, yeah, it just hasn't been translated. So
Well, I have heard there are fan translations, but I haven't. I don't know anything about it though.
I
I
wouldn't
just
trust a fan translation.
I have heard there are fan translations though.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna look into this because I adore that world. Like the world building is super cool.
Yeah, apparently like it's also like based on like Marxism too. I'm like, oh, he's read like China Mieville or something.
Deep cut, dude. Deep cut.
I know. I'm like, damn. I guess there's not enough well, there is a lot of Marxism. I guess there is a lot of Marxism in science fiction.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially during like the 20th century, like 20th century science fiction. But
Yeah, communism's sexy, I guess. I don't know.
Stalin is so sexy.
I mean, there were a few women who thought so, I guess.
Oh, that mustache. That mustache.
I mean, I have to. I mean, I don't know. I have to say the Nietzsche mustache is I think is peak. I have to say, can't beat that
It is.
mustache.
It is a good mustache. Yeah.
That's a.
But different mustaches tickle different fancies. So
Yeah, no, but Uncle Joe did have a great mustache though. Oh, he was like, oh man, even though he was like, he was a maniac. Yeah, no, it's good. Oh man, it's oh. It's like what? So like, what other type of books and comics do you like aside from the like new weird? You know.
I mean, I dabble in pretty much anything. There are a few genres that are just not my thing. Like I'm not big into romance, therefore I'm not really big into like romantasy or anything like that.
Mm.
But I'll always just try something out, Like I usually kind of do back and forth between fantasy and sci-fi and comics and kind of just dabble in all that as much as I can, throw in some nonfiction here and there. But, like recently finished book 7 in the Murderbot Diaries, Martha Wells
Yeah,
novella series.
I've heard good things about it. So apparently my friend Jason hates it. So
I'm kind of tired of it though. Yeah. Like I got to book 7 and I'm just like, there's nothing happening and I'm just not feeling it anymore, But then there's so much else that I'm like really excited to read. Like recently read Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman, which is amazing. Just like some really sarcastic fantasy. I'm a huge fan of Adrian Tchaikovsky, so it's like anything he writes, I'll check that out.
Mm-hmm.
So
I actually
like
read The Black Tongue Thief a few years ago, and I just wasn't. I didn't connect with it. It was just kind of.
That's totally fair. I mean, it feels like the kind of story that could like, you can either click with it or not. And I've heard even more so about the audiobook because he reads it himself, but he narrates it in like a thick Scottish accent.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've also read 2 other books from him. I read Those Across the River, which is a werewolf story.
Yeah.
And I freaking love werewolves, so I've jumped on that.
Yeah.
And I also read Between Two Fires, which was a really weird kind of apocalyptic historical.
Horror. Yeah.
Medieval, yeah. Basically like medieval apocalyptic stuff going on. Biblical apocalypse.
I just like how he dabbles in horror. Like he's very good at horror, and even in his fantasy, like I appreciate when he kind of incorporates more of those elements.
Yeah, the goblins were creepy in that.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just a fan of like when there's like a really strong sense of humor. I'm all for that.
Mm-hmm.
So. Actually, MJ and I are having him on the podcast soon, so
very
I'm really
cool.
excited. I'm really excited to chat with him about it. But yeah, just like I'm all over the place. Like you can look at my bookshelf. It's like I'm a huge fan of The Expanse, but also like one of my favorite series of all time is the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee.
Yeah, I still need to read that.
Oh, dude, it's so good. It's
I
still
need
good.
I still need to read that. I just because my friend Josh Pantalleresco actually had an interview with her, Fonda Lee, before like she blew up,
Yeah.
And I've also had a few other people I know, like Tori from Tori Talks, talk to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's been on my podcast. She's been on, I think 3 or 4 times.
She seems like an interesting individual.
She's amazing. She's just like one of the most fun people to talk to because she's both very, very intelligent and very skilled when it comes to writing craft and stuff like that. But she's also very personable and she has like, just like interesting shit going on in her life. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like cool. You're into like martial arts and you're into like Hong Kong action films, but you also love The Godfather, and like me and her just like nerded out a bunch over, like sort of like crime thrillers and stuff like that.
I was about to say when I did hear she was inspired by The Godfather, and I'm like, ooh,
Yeah,
I have to
yeah,
try that.
it's super good. It's basically like a Hong Kong action film mixed with The Godfather, and then throw in like a jade based magic system that makes all of like the martial arts action like extra intense and more akin to like low key superheroes. It's like
Okay.
the jade makes it possible for them to like jump higher or jump farther, or makes them like extra strong or more agile and different things like that. So it's really cool the way that she kind of like incorporated that magic system into like a very like 1980s sort of Asian inspired city with gangster crime families. It's super cool.
I mean, I do want to try it out at some point. I just,
Right.
I have a, if you can see, I have a bunch of books back there.
And they're all waiting to get read.
Yes. Now, will I read all of them? That's a whole other question entirely. But yeah, no, but yeah, Fond du Lis sounds like one I would like, because I do like great action.
Mm-hmm. It's very, very good pacing too. And it takes place over long periods of time where you can really like invest in the characters. And it's pretty much like the Godfather trilogy in the sense that it's like you see in Godfather Part 1, you see like young Michael Corleone. It's just like his introduction to the world, and then like his rise to power. And then the Godfather 2, it's like his power increases even more. But then in Godfather Part 3, where you see him as an old man and sort of like the descent into sort of like self destruction is just brilliant. And Fonda does that really, really well over 3 books.
I'll have to give it a shot, as I like to say.
Yeah, man.
But yes, I do think Godfather is one of my favorite films of all time. So,
You'll be right at home, man.
all right.
Just read it. Just do it.
Just do it. Just do it. Give it to me. Just do it. Do
Oh,
it.
man.
I don't know if you watch. I'm watching a lot of Anthony Fantano recently.
I have not heard of Anthony Fantana.
Oh, he's a music reviewer on the YouTube.
Oh wait, no, dude. Oh, okay. What's the name of his channel again?
You can just look up Anthony Fantano. You'll probably find him. It's called
The
The Needle
needle,
Drop.
the needle drop. Yeah, because I used to be a music journalist
Oh,
back in
really?
university. Yeah, yeah. So I was aware of the needle drop. I just totally forgot his name.
So,
But
do you think I have to ask you this, because this is something I've talked about with a couple friends of mine, because you're in the speculative fiction range. Do you think there is such a thing, and I'm not counting Filk here, because that's specifically this type of music, but do you think there's such a thing as like science fiction or speculative fiction music?
mm,
Because, I've listened to some like Radiohead's OK Computer, and I'm like if there was like music in a sci-fi novel, it would probably sound like this.
yeah, but then there are kind of like music genres that already embody that. I think like electronic is way too broad, and a lot of electronic music can be considered sci-fi. But then there are like very, very specific genres like synthwave,
Mm.
which just sounds like it's like made for, like cyberpunk or certain like genres of science fiction. But then like I listen to, so like a huge sort of go-to musician for me while writing Mushroom Blues was Brian Eno.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
I've heard some of his stuff.
he's more like, depending on which ones, but it's like he's very much like ambient electronic music, or just like ambient kind of stuff. And there's some of his albums where it's like, this is like the most spacey kind of music that is out there. Like if I was like walking on a distant exoplanet and I was listening to the most appropriate soundtrack, it would probably be something by Brian Eno. So I don't know, man. It depends. Like I think music doesn't really benefit from having genres that apply to specific genres of fiction.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but there are sometimes, just sometimes, where I have to, I'm like, this is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever heard there's a musician named Calm Trues?
I don't think I have heard of this person.
Okay. So yeah, just fuck up Tom Cruise's name and you'll find him. And his music is basically what I would apply to so much of cyberpunk.
Oh wow! Like his name literally is.
Yeah.
reminds me of Rit Momney, which is
my god!
Similarly, just with Mitt Romney. That's
amazing.
Hilarious.
So yeah, Calm Trues is very much like straight up cyberpunk music.
Calm Trues, I like this.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean there's music that for me is very very fitting for fiction, which is why like I made a Spotify playlist for Mushroom Blues. It's like every physical copy of the book in the back has a page with a QR code, and you can just put in that you can just like scan that QR code on your phone and it'll take you directly to the Spotify playlist. But then I also had two friends in Sweden make an original soundtrack for the book.
Oh wow! You know a lot. You've had an interesting life, and you know a lot of interesting people. Is what I'm getting from this.
Yeah, I mean, like one of them is my best friend. He was the best man at my wedding, but he's also we met in Berlin, but he lives in Sweden where he grew up, and basically he's like a UX designer working for apps, but then he's also a DJ and a music producer. And so I just messaged him. I was like, dude, you want to make because he's known about this world, like the Fungalverse, since I started creating it. And I just hit him up and I was like, hey, do you want to make a soundtrack for this? And he was fully on board, brought on one of his friends, Victor, who's also like a really talented musician, but all three of us are big into mushrooms. So like they go foraging and stuff over in the forests in Sweden and go and pick mushrooms, and then they'll just like send me pictures and stuff. But it was perfect. Like just like the three of us have this like mutual appreciation for mushrooms, but also they're really talented musicians. And yeah, they created like 8 original tracks. So there's like a companion album to go along with Mushroom Blues.
Fascinating. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh man, you got Veronica Roth on there. Not really a big fan of her work, but we won't talk about that.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Divergent, but like that's neither here nor there. I'm not crazy into YA, but it's like I like some of Veronica's newer work. Or at least I appreciate that she's experimenting in the sort of like adult SFF space, and she's just a really really cool person. So.
Oh, I'm sure she's nice.
Yeah.
But it says do you run FanFi Addict?
No. So FanFi Addict was started by David Walters, a buddy of mine over in Alabama. He started the blog and I joined in as like a reviewer, but then I realized pretty quickly that I don't love writing written reviews. So I was just like pitched everyone at the blog. I was like, hey, I want to start a podcast. Would anyone want to do it with me? And everyone was like, no, but we'll support you. We'll cheer you on from the sidelines. So yeah, so I just went with it, man.
Yeah, and I bet you just roll your eyes later. You're like, thanks for the support, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much. But no, it's like it kicked off really really fast. So it's like I decided that I wanted to do it.
Beard of Darkness and Tori write for you guys?
Yep, Beard of Darkness. Tori Tekken, is that the one?
Yeah,
the one
Tori Tekken.
No, she doesn't write for FanFi Addict, but it's like Crystal Matar and Andy Peliquin, a bunch of different people. Maybe Before We Go blog, could be.
Maybe I'm thinking of another blog she was working on. Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but yeah. So it's like I started out just like I'm gonna do this podcast and see how it goes. My first guest was like Hugh Howey, which is pretty fucking insane. And yeah, just it escalated very quickly, to the point that I was like interviewing amazing authors within like the first months of starting SFF Addicts.
Oh
And
wow, you talked
yeah.
to R.R. Verity. That's
Oh,
interesting.
Ronnie's a good buddy of mine.
Oh, okay.
Are you gonna talk shit about the first binding?
Well, I haven't read the first binding, so I'll
Okay.
say nothing. But I have heard people who have talked shit about it. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've talked to Ronnie about the people who talk shit about them.
poor guy. I bet he's just like, oh.
Yeah, yeah. But it's just the way fandom works, honestly. And it's like there are like so many authors that we've chatted to. It's like even like Jim Butcher, you know, people shit on the Dresden Files a lot too. And it's like, yeah, like take it or leave it, man. Not everything is for everybody. And at the end of the day, like even if someone's not a fan of someone's work, like you can still take a lot of value from the advice that they have to offer, and when it comes to writing craft, when it comes to a ton of different things. So for me, it's been really cool. Like even if I'm not like mega fan of every single author's work, you know, it's cool to be able to chat with them and kind of glean all kinds of useful writing advice and stuff like that from them.
Well, it seems here that you've talked to a lot of people. Let's just see here who you've talked to. You got you've talked to like, oh man, so many people. You talked to Josiah Bancroft, who
Josiah's amazing. I adore
I
him.
actually read God, his first book, Sinlin Ascends,
Send Ascends, yeah.
a few months ago, and I liked it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Paolini, which wow. Adrian Tchaikovsky, very cool. I haven't read him yet, but I know he's a big
And
name.
Tchaikovsky was very, very nice to blurb my book, so I got a blurb from him on the
Oh,
front cover.
that must have been cool.
Yeah, no, he's been on. I've chatted with him a bunch, and he's been just an absolute gem of a human being. So he was very, very kind to offer that.
Um, let's see other names I recognize. Michael J. Sullivan. I wanted to check out his book for a while because I've heard it's very much like Fafhrd the Grey Mouser, and I do like those stories. So.
Which one you like his Rhaenyra Chronicles?
Yeah, the one with the two guys. The one's I think one's an assassin.
Yeah, Theft of Swords, I think is the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, you talked to Jim Butcher. So you made it to the big times. I really scored here, didn't I?
No, man, I'm just like happy to chat with anyone on YouTube. I'm low key author, but like big time podcaster, I guess.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, so you're like a big timer in the podcast game. Like, my God, you even have like specials where you're talking about like writing mysteries.
Yeah, I mean we do like 2-part interviews. So we'll chat with one author, but for 2 episodes. So we'll do like sort of interview straight up, kind of like this, and then after that we'll do a masterclass with that particular author. And so it's like we give them the option to choose what they want to talk about, which is really fun. So it's like with Josiah, we talked about writing mysteries, even though he was kind of like, I'm not worthy of a masterclass. Like I shouldn't be teaching a masterclass. So I was like, I placated him a little bit. I was like, we'll do it together, and if that makes you happy.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Sinlin Ascends, like it was a good book. I liked it, but it didn't like I wouldn't like damn like it didn't like I thought I was gonna love it. I just
Yeah.
liked it, which is fine. Like, it's
But
still a good
I
book.
adore that whole series.
I
The
am
Books of
definitely hoping to
Babel
read more
is
of them.
fantastic.
It's just my reading's kind of slowed recently.
Yeah, and his books are progressively more chonky as they go along.
But I always look for more unique fantasy. I mean, as much as I enjoy my pseudo medieval fantasy adventures, it's always nice seeing. Uh, it's always nice reading something different.
Hmm.
Which is why I wanted to. Which was why I first took interest in Mushroom Blues, because I'm like, oh man, this looks like something different. I gotta. I mean, it's not fantasy, but same thing.
There's touches of fantasy in there, more like urban fantasy, but it's kind of like the fungal people are like definitely rooted more in like a fantasy race.
Mm.
But then on top of that, it's like touches of cyberpunk. Then there's like the police procedural noir elements and sort of like aspects of science fiction and stuff. And other stories that I'm going to write in the fungal verse are like much more heavily rooted in sci-fi. Like the next series that I'm going to put out. So it's like Hoffman Report is the first series that I've started, but then I'm going to kind of kick off another one in the fungal verse and jump back and forth with releases. That one is like 30 years in the future, deeply kind of like sort of getting into things like corporate culture and like espionage and sort of like gangster crime families and stuff like that with biotech and fungal tech and all these things and how that kind of plays into really big cyberpunk themes like corporate control and whatnot.
I see. I see. I mean, it definitely sounds like you got a lot of plans up your sleeve.
I got a lot of I got a lot of fungi up my sleeve.
You even have an interview with yourself. That's,
I got a bunch of moldy shit up there.
yeah. So like, how did that work? They go like, "Hey, can we just talk to you for for the for the do they just come up to you and be like, "Can we talk to you about your book?"
I mean, like, it's a symbiotic relationship. It's like I don't know. Now it's good. It's like Venom or something like that. I got a
It's like,
fucking symbiote just hanging around me.
or like, what's funny about Vandermeer? I actually like Born, which this might be a bit of a spicy take,
Born is
but
super cool.
I actually think I like Born more than Southern Reach. No.
I think for me, Southern Reach is just more iconic because it hit me at a time where I wasn't expecting it.
Well, sure, yeah, yeah.
And so I was able to go into Born kind of like having some preconceived notion of like what Vandermeer's work is like. But I think just as like a novel, Born is one of his best and is super strong.
Yeah, I still need to read like Hummingbird Salamander
Hummingbird Salamander is like okay.
and like Dead Astronaut. I've heard Dead Astronauts is freaking out there. Like,
Yeah. But like stylistically and craft wise, just like very different than most of his other work.
yeah, and then I still need to try like the Ambergris series or however you pronounce that.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid, but I'm kind of nervous that I'll just compare it too much to Baslag.
But they're very different. And, it's like they're both like they're sort of urban fantasy, new weird, set in cities, but yeah, they're touching on different things.
So one's
they're
more
doing different things.
fungal, while the other one's
Yeah.
more animal people.
Yeah, insectoids and stuff.
Insectoids. Oh man, I remember reading the Scar, and there's that bit with the mosquito people. I'm just like,
Oh my
man.
god, yeah.
Oh,
I love it. I think you'd really like Tchaikovsky's work actually, because he writes a lot
that
of
dude's a
non-human
machine.
characters.
Oh my god, I've
He
seen
is
like
a machine. But he writes a lot of non-human characters, like Children of Time. Like there's two POVs, and one of them is a spider.
yeah, I've heard he has psychic spiders. I mean,
there's like
which
spiders.
is kind of funny
there's
because the project I'm working on might have a spider in it, but it's a
Ooh.
little
little secret.
secret, yeah.
But he's got tons of really cool characters, and like they're like alien, like sentient alien octopi. There's his
Right.
Final Architecture series has all kinds of like weird aliens in it. These like essentially these like deified clam people. These like like
I'll have to
weird
check him
alien
out then. That
clams.
sounds really cool. I mean,
Yeah, he's huge into zoology, so he incorporates that into.
I mean, I wouldn't say that like the main appeal with like Mieville is the animal people, but that, I mean, it's different. Like I said.
Yeah, I like it. So it's obviously not the main appeal. There are a lot of different things going on, a lot of different cogs in the machine, but I do appreciate when it's like
Is there
out of the
fungi
box.
in Mieville?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so
No,
either.
there's like a lot of like mutant shit, especially in the Scar.
You haven't talked to Rockio yet? I'm surprised.
No, because I mean I have his email.
That dude
'Cause
talks to everybody.
he he's done TBRCon, which is like a virtual convention that FemFi Addict runs, and I've helped out with. So he's taken part in stuff, and I've chatted with him. He's a really really nice guy, but I haven't had him on SFF Addicts because I'm at a place where I'm like, I read book one, like I have it right here. This chonky ass boy with like the broken spine.
Yeah, that's chunky boy.
Yeah, but I just it was very difficult book for me. Like I appreciate what it's doing and sort of the inspirations that it takes from Dune. And sort of like that, like I don't know how much of Rocchio's work you've read.
I haven't read any. I just see him around on YouTube a lot.
Yeah.
That's how I know
Yeah,
who he is.
he's all over the place, and he's gotten really big over the last year or two, just because of like booktubers like Daniel Green and stuff like that. But I read Empire of Silence, and I just wasn't floored by it. And
Well, so you give it a 4 on Goodreads, so you must have liked it.
I liked it, but I wasn't like floored by it in the sense that like
Oh, okay.
it felt like a prologue to something bigger.
Oh,
But I'm at
yeah.
but I'm at a point where I'm not fully convinced if I want to go down that path yet.
Yeah,
Because there's like
it's like when
there's
I
so
read
much else.
It's like when I
There's
read
so much else that I want to read, but it's like that book alone was like 700 pages, and every book in that series is really really thick. And so I'm like, do I want to get into a series where I know there's like 6 or 7 books now, and each one of those is like 600 to 800 pages, and with all the other stuff that I want to read, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm very conflicted.
Yeah, no, I am. I know what you mean. I'm like, I'm not a. I tend to be picky with the long, like with like I don't really like the like really long fantasy, unless it's like Game of Thrones maybe, which is like 7 books, or it should be 7 books. But
then you look at like Sanderson's series.
Yeah.
Pretty much every. Yeah, I'm just like, dude. It's
Also,
like I want to read The Way of Kings, but it's like, dude, it's like 1,000+ pages.
I mean, I don't really agree with. I have some quibbles with his view on fantasy, and I've just never really been. It's like the Wheel of Time. I've just not been drawn to Sanderson's work. I'll read it someday, but I haven't heard anything from anyone that's been like, man, I gotta read this as soon as possible.
Mistborn was really cool, but I don't know. Chonkers are just not good for my TBR these days. Especially with like MJ and I having like reading stuff for the podcast and the people that we interview. So
I mean, hey, I'm not against the chunky fantasy. I mean, I guess with like something like Perdido Street Station is a little different because it's predominantly a standalone story.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it's not as chunky as like Way of Kings or something like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, like Perdido Street Station is not a short book by any means, but then again, it's not like 1,000+ pages.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I could talk about that book forever. I love it. It's so good. I do want to read The City and the City again because I remember reading it in like 2019, and I was like, oh okay. And I don't know if I was in the right headspace to read it when I read it. I do remember some things like the like who did it, like who did it, and the oh god, what is that police force who's like the in between people? I forget what they're called.
Yeah, I can't remember either, but
yeah, those guys.
Those in between people.
Yeah, the in between. Because again, I have to admit, as accessible as that book is, I still don't fully comprehend the concept of it.
And that's China Mieville. That is his most comprehensible book.
No, but like with like Pretty Street Station, like I could kind of the chaos energy stuff. I was like, what the hell is he going on about?
But I
Like
think
I
that
could
one's
mostly
more
understand what was going on.
right. But I think that one's more intimidating because of the world and the sort of like there's a lot of complexity to the narrative. But I think The City and the City is like much more analogous to things that we're familiar with.
Well, yeah, sure.
So I think it's like, especially now with like everything that's going on with Israel and Palestine, be like, that's a pretty good book to read.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. I'm looking forward to whenever I get it, or I'm hoping September maybe I'll get to it, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. So like when you started writing your book, was like The City and the City, like man, that's one to look to.
Yeah, that one because of it's the way that it kind of blended police procedural with a bunch of different aspects was like, yes, it's a police procedural and it's kind of grounded in something a little bit more familiar. And so what I did with my book was like I grounded it in noir and police procedural and murder mystery kind of beats and tropes and things that people could be a little bit more.
So are there like mushroom gangsters in your story?
Oh hell yeah!
Oh yeah! Oh god,
Yeah.
I gotta start reading this as soon as possible.
So yeah, so it's like I kind of like root people in the familiarity of those genres, but then I throw in like more and more
Your weird
stuff
mushroom
as the
stuff.
book, just more mushroom stuff as the book goes on. Yeah. and then things get really psychedelic. So
So, like, is there still like a coherent story, or did you go like full PKD where it's just like weird
no, it's
psychedelic stuff?
it's much more coherent.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Because like, look, I love PKD, but that guy, he really went there when he went there.
Yeah, like clearly he was on acid while he was writing so much of his work. But for me, it's like, yeah, I wrote it with the intention of like, I don't want people to be completely lost while reading this, especially when things get more psychedelic. So it's like all of it is like comprehensible. It just depends on like your
You don't
tolerance
want to alienate
for
people.
yeah. I mean, even though it is a book about alienation, I don't want to alienate the reader too much, but it depends on like your comfort level with like a sort of like morally questionable protagonist who sort of awakens to the realities of their choices over the course of the book. It depends on your relationship with fungi. I've had people straight up say like fungi may creep me the fuck out, and you know. So, but then I'm like, yeah, read the book because the main character is actually mycophobic, so she's like,
I mean, I'm not creeped
disgusted
out
and-
by fungus.
yeah. But there are some people who are just like really grossed
I don't know.
out
I don't
by
know
it.
if I'm like. I don't know. Now I don't know if I would run into a field of fungi and like roll around in it, but I'm not. I don't think I'm scared of it.
Just bask in those spores.
I would probably die.
Oh my god. But yeah, so there's
aren't
like there
spores deadly, or is it just depending on
No.
the mushroom?
no there's nothing about spores is deadly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's basically like
I'm going off
mold-
The Last of Us here. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I'm very ignorant
Mold-
when it comes to mycology.
mold can be toxic, but just in terms of like the density of it within like an environment. Like if your whole house is infested with mold, it could give you like a lot of like respiratory issues and stuff like that, but it would
It's
take
not
a lot.
advisable to live there.
Not advisable. So those are the more like toxic forms of mold. But in terms of like poisonous, it's only the ingestion of like certain mushrooms that would actually kill you, and usually it's caused by liver failure. So it's not a fun way to go. But
It doesn't sound like it.
yeah,
No,
and obviously like the mushrooms that are poisonous, it's like there's one called a death cap. Don't eat the death cap.
don't eat it.
Please don't eat the death cap. I highly recommend not doing that.
I mean, so I am curious because you run the Fanfly Addict podcasting stuff. Are you planning on talking to more indie authors in the near future? Like,
I mean, I talked to a lot of indie
I
authors
mean,
in the
I see
past.
there are some you've talked to, like
Yeah.
Ryan Cahill. Though, is Ryan
Yeah.
Cahill indie anymore?
He's still indie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they
I,
got
I,
you on there, and you're definitely
yeah.
indie. And who
It's
else?
mostly like yeah, like it depends entirely on the circumstance, but also it's like when we do things like TBR Con, then we highlight a lot more indie authors. And there's just a ton of podcasts out there that I know it's like they're doing better work than I am in terms of like the indie author space. Like, you know, I got friends like Herman Sternagel is doing the greatest podcast in the multiverse, which is fantastic. There are a lot of like booktube channels, you know, like you. There's like Case Hidden Shelf, a bunch of different booktubers who are talking to more
Oh
indie
yeah,
authors. So.
didn't she talk to you? I think
Yep.
I think I saw
Yeah.
I think I saw her talk to.
Yeah, Kay and I chatted a few weeks ago, actually. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. You know,
Yeah.
I was actually gonna. Yeah, I actually tried getting her on this podcast, but it was one of those cases like she didn't say no, but she didn't say yes either, and it was kind of.
Just gonna leave you in limbo.
Yeah, she was basically like, "Look, I'm gonna be busy for the next few months, but like maybe." That was kind of the gist of it. Hope she doesn't watch this and be like, "You're misrepresenting my words." And
It's all good, Kay. We love you, and just like
yeah,
come
no,
on when you have
we're
time.
big fan. Great voice.
Very great voice. Yeah, she does have a great voice. But yeah, there are a lot of podcasts and folks out there who are doing great work in the indie space. So yeah, I mean MJ and I kind of like have our niche, which, you know, we're talking to more authors in the traditional space, but trying to mix it up with like debut authors, and then we got like
So I
you know,
guess I'll
New
ask
York
you
Times
this
bestsellers
then:
and whatever.
Are there authors you're looking forward to talking to in the future?
Oh hell yeah, dude. We've
Also,
got some.
are you ever going to talk to Jeff Vandermeer? And if you ever do that, could you hit me up with his contact information? Because he's on my bucket list of people to get on this podcast.
Vandermeer's on my bucket list as well. I would love to talk to him. But yeah, like we've got coming up later this year, like MJ and I basically like plot things out like months in advance, but we're going to be talking to, we got a bunch of like content creators that are coming on, because we're going to start doing like one-off master classes. So we got like Mike from Mike's Book Reviews,
Oh, yeah.
which I'm really excited about.
I've also been trying to get him on my
He's
channel
a great
for so
he's a
long.
great dude. And then we have Evan Lycum, who's he's on Instagram mostly, but his handles Book Reviews Kill. So I'm really excited to chat with him as well. We're just gonna like do some kind of like one-off master classes that are more to do with like publishing and content creation and stuff like that. And then hopefully, I mean, like I contacted the publicist, but I'm really hoping we can talk to James S.A. Corey, which would be awesome.
You mean the two guys?
The two
Daniel
guys, yeah.
Abraham?
I've interviewed Daniel before, but not Ty. So I'm hoping like we can get both of them on and chat about that. And then for the fall, like fingers crossed, I would love to talk to John Gwynn, because I adore his books.
I watch his sons on YouTube.
Yeah. Ed and Will are great.
I would also like to talk to them at some point. I don't have any like way to contact them. Well, I am on their Discord.
There you go, man. If you're on their Discord, that's perfect.
Maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, lots of stuff. It's mostly just like a lot of hopefuls, but you know, we're always just kind of mixing it up, and I think doing the master classes helps a lot to kind of keep things fresh, because it's like Buellman, he's doing his master class and like making old monsters new again. I'm just like, fuck yeah, man, that's a great topic. You know, I'd love to hear him talk about goblins and werewolves and vampires and whatever else. So,
I mean, his werewolf novel was really damn good in that first half, and in the second half, I was kind of like, I actually have thought, because I have talked to him on Twitter before, Like I've
Mm-hmm.
sent him like a hey. I actually asked him if he read Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser because Black Tongue Thief reminded me of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. And I was like, oh, hey, did you read, like, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser? He's like, no, I didn't start till after I finished Black Tongue Thief. So I was like, okay. Can't win them all.
No, it's all good. But it's cool that you chatted with him on Twitter.
Yeah, I might ask him what he was going for with the ending of though I would feel kind of weird about spoiling that on Twitter.
I can ask him off the air next week.
Yeah, and then you can, like, email me.
Yeah, I'll email you the transcript.
No, it's. I was about to say. I mean, I would be so jealous if you talked to Jeff Vandermeer. Oh my god.
Or like China Mieville. That would be crazy.
Yeah, no.
Or PKD, just bring him back from the dead.
So like, what drugs were you on when you did Dallas?
Yeah. I feel like if I recorded with PKD, I would have to take LSD while recording with him.
Your pupils are freaking dilated.
Yeah, man. I just have like black discs for eyes.
People are like, "Are you okay? Like, would you be even able to focus while you're on LSD doing a stream?"
Maybe. Yeah. You know, I've written before while on hallucinogens. So
How does that work? You gotta tell me this.
it's like a hot mess, but it's fun. Yeah, it's just like a lot of like seemingly incomprehensible things that you kind of have to like go back and decipher. So it's like
fair enough.
it's like you know, living out like the movie Memento, but with words.
Oh, oh yeah. Wow. Okay, that's an interesting way to describe that. But it seems you have another book here, and I'm looking at your website called Spore City. So, like, what's that going to be about?
Yeah, so that's the one that I was telling you about with like corporate espionage and
Oh,
gangster crime families. Yeah, so that's going to be my next book. That's the start of a different trilogy.
is it in the same world?
Yep, so 30 years after, and so I'm just going to go back between, so it'll be like Mushroom Blues, Spore City, and then the sequel to Mushroom Blues and the sequel to Spore City, and just kind of back and forth.
And there's
And then
another one that's to be announced, but I won't ask you about that because it's to be announced
Yeah.
late 2024. So,
Exactly.
all right.
I'm not going to tell you anything.
Oh, okay. No, but I guess one other thing I'll ask before we hop off because I'm gonna eat with my family after this. But it's one that's I actually talked with like I said I talked with Tim McKay last night for this show, and you know he's an indie author. You were also an indie author, but you've also talked with trad pub authors, which I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. And maybe you've heard this before, but I think I was interested in. Okay, how do I put this? I'll just lay it out. So, like, do you think there is a difference in quality between traditional published books and self-published books? I'm curious to hear your perspective. I like to ask indie authors this out of just to hear their perspective because
I think the gap has tightened over the last few years.
okay, yeah.
So that like, don't get me wrong, like you can go on Amazon and you can find a ton of indie published stuff that is like the cover looks horrendous and you don't really know like what's going to be on the inside, but most people judge a book by its cover, you know? It's one of those like sayings that is really like antithetical to the truth. And it's like most people judge a book by its cover, especially when you're looking at thumbnails on Amazon when you buy your books. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I asked this because I think because I've seen that at least on our side of the internet that the indie self-published, whatever you want to call it, movement has really started growing, and it's not really just like vanity projects anymore. Like there's actual stories being told by people who want to be taken seriously. And I mean, I know there are some I know there are some indie authors and there are some I've met who've kind of chafed at this because they just don't want to talk about it anymore. But I do think it's a conversation worth having.
Yeah, I think for me the most meaningful part of this kind of topic is that the quality has gone up because the authors have put more intention into making quality products, you know? And it's like more I've seen more authors, like ever since I started blogging and podcasting and everything like that. I've seen the quality in indie covers and design go way up.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen like the intention that
I mean, the
authors
cover of your
have.
book looks pretty good. I don't know
Yeah, I
who
mean,
did
like
that.
I got Felix Ortiz to do the artwork, and then I did all the design and typography myself.
Oh, I was about to say, hey, you draw stuff. Did you do
Yeah,
it?
and then I did all the formatting and all the everything for the interior of the book.
Mm.
And so for me, it's like there's just a greater wealth of information and a greater wealth of resources. And so it's like, for me these days, there's no excuse for someone to have a shitty cover because there's so many good cover artists, and you can find cover designers and really talented people. Or like me, like I just have the particular skill set that I could do it myself. And the actual quality of the stories, I think, is really picking up. And you're starting to see traditional publishers notice that because they're basically offering huge advances to indie authors to either republish their indie books, like you got like Travis Baldree,
Mm-hmm.
or you know like Romantasy is really big,
Mm-hmm.
like Clarissa Broadbent, and authors like that, where it's like they started out indie, but then they get offers from traditional publishers
Mm-hmm.
to either start new series or republish the stuff that they'd already self-published. So it's like traditional publishers are actually, and agents are seeing the quality in indie. I think the storytelling quality has gone up. I think the presentation quality, the marketing quality that indie authors are able to achieve. You know, there's like book tour companies. There's so much more resources now for indie authors to do a good job. And so when I see like a really terrible cover, you know, um, to me it's just like, okay, there obviously that author put effort and intention into that, but compared to everything else around, there's just so much more that indie authors can do these days. So for me, it's like the gap is lessening more and more every year, and I'm just like really excited to see indie taking off in this way. And personally, like I don't want to go trad because I have tons of friends who are traditionally published authors, and I'm not a big fan of how that world works. So I'd rather
I
maintain the
also wanted to
control as
ask
much
you
as
because you
possible.
have talked to a lot of trad pub authors, and
Hmm.
I thought you'd have an interesting perspective on it.
I mean, talking to traditionally published authors convinced me not to go traditional.
Fair
So
enough.
I started the podcast wanting to go trad, to get an agent, all that. And I went the self-publishing route because of all the authors that I talked to. You know, like the first author that I talked to, Hugh Howey, was basically like, there's no reason to go traditional. Like self-publishing is the future. And ever since then, it's like I've talked to a lot of trad authors who've had success and who have definitely lucked out, but they also write really, really good stories. I have heard a lot of horror stories at the same time. And so for me, just because of like the person that I am and like the ways that I like to approach creative projects, I'd rather do it all myself, you know? Like I can like when and how would a traditionally published author be like, okay, we're gonna like give this debut author like, you know, to have like pictures of mold at the front of his book and like to be able to do all this design and stuff myself, like
Spores.
yeah, like no trad publisher would be like, oh, you're a debut author, I'm gonna give you all that extra page space. Well, hell no, man. But for me, it's really important to be able to kind of give my book a little bit something extra, and whether it's like on the design front or the music front, all these different kinds of things, I prefer to maintain more control in that regard. But not a lot of trad pub authors or trad publishers are gonna give that to a debut author. Plus, my book is super weird, super niche, and it's like, it's definitely found its sort of like readership and market in sort of like the indie readership and whatnot. But who knows how much faith an agent would have had in that, or how much faith an editor would have had in that, and how much longer I would have had to wait in order to actually publish that and get the book out there.
Maybe you could have gone to ESG or whatever this publishing company who published this was called. And
I don't even know. Like, what?
been like, hey, I'm like Jeff Vandermeer. But yeah, no, I hear your point.
It's just like so many stages, man. It's like so many stages for potential rejection, so many stages for potential failure. There's the possibility that I could have gotten an agent and like no editor wanted to pick this book up, and then it goes nowhere. So for me, it's like I'd rather just do it myself and be able to control the different parts of the process and market the book the way that I know it needed to be marketed. And as a result, it's like, cool. Like, I earned back all of the money that I invested in the book, sold, just today, like I looked at the numbers, it was like over 700 copies, which for an indie debut is like really solid. So,
I mean, being the FanFi addict guy probably helped a lot. Which is admittedly why I started my YouTube channel as well. I was hoping maybe to get some potential readers.
Yeah,
and get them to read my book.
Just fucking rope you in.
And they're gonna watch this and be like, I don't want to read them anymore.
No, it's like, fuck your Sfungelverse, man. But yeah, I mean, it's like everyone has their route, but for me, like doing the podcast was the way for me to be able to learn as much as I could for free from other authors.
I mean, that's a weird spelling of Hoffman, I have to say.
The spelling of the Hoffman comes from Albert Hoffman. Yeah, so it's like it comes from Albert Hoffman, who's actually the man who isolated the sort of like molecules for LSD. So that's where the name Hoffman came from. Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say fungus. I'm like, so there's like some Inception level fungi references in here.
Well, technically, it's like a psychedelic reference. But
oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's like the guy who basically isolated the compound for LSD.
I mean, Aldous Huxley did LSD for a while.
Yeah. But he was more into things like mescaline.
Have you done mescaline?
No, I have not.
Do you want to?
I would love to, yeah.
Maybe I'll get you back on this channel and we can just talk about psychedelics for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
No,
the only ones I haven't done is mescaline and ayahuasca.
So you've done like peyote?
Well, mescaline is from peyote.
Oh.
Yeah.
That shows you how much I know.
Mescaline is the compound, peyote is the cactus.
Oh. But yeah, I think that's a good way to wrap up. This has been fun talking about psychedelics and weird fiction and weird sci-fi.
Yeah, man, I haven't met anyone who has like such a deep appreciation for weird fiction as you. So
thank you.
Yeah, no, it was really cool, man. That is a very high compliment. Please take it.
But if you want to shill your social media before we get going here, feel free.
Yeah, man. You can find me pretty much everywhere at Adrian M. Gibson. You can check out my podcast at SFF Addicts Pod. You can also check that out on Apple Podcasts, pretty much all the major podcast platforms. It's on Spotify and YouTube and video as well. So you can catch new episodes every Tuesday. Then you can also pick up my book, Mushroom Blues. It's in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. You can find it on Amazon. You can order it from places like Barnes & Noble or Indigo if you're in Canada. Different online vendors like that. And then the audiobook is coming later this year as well. So I just signed the contract.
Yeah, I heard you're not doing the audiobook anymore. I think I saw you tweet.
Yeah,
I
realized I don't really like doing audiobook narration, which I'd rather try it out and realize like, yeah, this isn't for me. But I've already got a narrator. She is amazing, and I'm really, really excited for what she's gonna do to bring this this world's life, at least in
So
audio.
wait, I should ask this before we go. So is this a first-person narration,
Yep.
like noir style? Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So the POV is Henrietta Hoffman, and the narrator, she's British, so she's gonna basically, like, I heard some of her narration. I was like, this is pretty much exactly what I imagined in my head.
Is
So
that
it's
the
very,
one on
very
the
exciting.
fan filing addict, or is that you reading it?
That's me reading it. Yeah,
Oh.
the sample. Yeah, which I'm gonna update with the new narration once my narrator
Okay.
wraps that up.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you for giving so much of your time for this evening.
my pleasure, man.
I hope that you have a good rest of your evening, and well, keep on with the fungi, the
Thanks,
weird
man.
fungi science fiction.
Yeah, I'm gonna
fantasies.
just like keep delivering weird shit. So I'm really,
Yeah, make like
I'm
saga
really
with
excited.
fungi or something.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I got a bunch of fun stories coming. Don't you worry. But yeah, man. Thank you for having me on.
All right.
Thank you for